Let's do a show. Welcome, everybody, to Inside Coverage, the how and the why behind any and everything you need to know in the National Football League. Happy Monday. We have all but one game done in week 2 of the preseason. We got a game tonight, the Commanders and the Bengals, with storylines on both sides of the ball. We are here, by the way, Monday through Thursday at 6:30 Eastern Time during not only the preseason, but the regular season as well. We're so happy that you are joining us. My name is Andrew Siciliano. This is not my show. I am just the man who has the steering wheel, at least for now. Can we fit them both in the passenger seat? I wish I don't want anyone in the back seat. All right? It's Frank Schwab and Jori Epstein. Hello and welcome to you both. Jori, we had a siren last week behind you. As the show was coming on just now, did you hear my neighbor's 9-year-old was ringing my doorbell? Did you hear that?
No, but can we let your neighbor's 9-year-old on the show? I want to meet them.
Yeah, why not?
Is that allowed?
Format.
I did not.
He's a great kid.
Sanders. Why not? Let's go.
He's a great kid. I just looked at the camera. I'm like, who is at the door? I would love to let him in. He would probably bring a lot of color to the show.
Girl Scout cookies or something?
Oh,
I mean, I did go through some remaining Thin Mints last night. I don't need any more. I've been living on the road. It is the last thing I need. Maybe in the D block for a kicker, we'll invite him over. Frank, how's everything in your neck of the woods?
it's going great, and preseason's almost over. That's how I feel about it. We're about 2/3 of the way through. We got a real game in 17 days. Very happy for that. Very happy to stop with all these injuries, these nagging injuries we got all weekend. That'll be nice to give these guys a chance to rest before the season opens.
I thought it was great last Friday when Sean McDermott, after the Bills had their scrimmage, or before actually their joint practice with the Bears, he was asked, hey, would you play Josh Allen in the preseason? Hint, he won't, and he didn't on Sunday night. Boy, that game was ugly, 38-0. He said, if I could put him in bubble wrap, and he didn't necessarily say it tongue-in-cheek, I think he meant it. And yeah, let's get through the preseason without the injuries, and that goes for tonight's game as well. Let's get to tonight's game. It's the Commanders, it's the Bengals. There are trade stories on both sides of the football. We're going to open up with Cincinnati and with Trey Hendrickson, who's 30 years old. He's going to be 31 in December. He's good. Is he Myles Garrett good? I don't know. Is he TJ Watt good? I don't know. But all I know is the numbers say the last 2 seasons, he's been the most productive defensive end rushing the football in the National Football League. He has cumulatively led the league in sacks the last 2 seasons with 35. He has wanted to be paid. He has been holding in, and now it seems they have reached an impasse. As the story is, the Bengals are once again listening to offers. What do they want? Well, they would probably take anything that looks nice right now. We have the Diana Rossini tweet on the screen. She says a young defensive player and a 2026 first-round pick. That's from league sources. There are others, my friend Tom Pelissero at NFL Network, suggesting that maybe it would be a second-round pick. They'd be willing to do that deal for a 2. But, guys, there are a couple of problems here. Number one, your defense was awful last year. Okay, just awful. You lost 4 games in which you allowed 33 points. That is hard to do. I mean, that is something like a bunch of 12-year-olds playing Madden. That's something that they would do. You're not supposed to lose that way in the NFL. Number 2, if you do give up that piece, the other team now has to pay Trey Hendrickson because, Frank, he doesn't want to play for only $16 million, which is what the Bengals have him on the books for this year. So the idea that they're going to get something done right now, to me, still seems far-fetched.
Which is why I sit back and say, how did it take the Bengals until August 17th to figure this out? Because we all have been talking about this for months. And did the Bengals just assume that Trey Hendrickson was going to cave? Because he's been saying the whole time, like, I'm willing to miss games here. And all of a sudden they wake up on August 17th and say, wow, we're at an impasse. You've been at an impasse for weeks and you could have been working on a trade. The Bengals have kind of botched this, I think. And in many ways, getting back to your point, how are the Bengals any better without Trey Hendrickson? I get he wants to get paid, and it's tough to pay him and Chase and Higgins and Burrow and all this. But you're not any closer to playoffs without him. It was criminal for the Bengals to not make the playoffs last season with Joe Burrow playing like an MVP. And this just stuns me that the Bengals are all of a sudden like, yeah, maybe we should trade Trey Hendrickson. Well, yeah, we could all see this coming if you weren't going to pay him. So I don't know. I just don't know what the Bengals are doing right now.
See, it's funny to me that you guys are questioning why they're just now talking about the trade, because to me, I'm like, oh, well, if we're still talking about it this time, how often do we see trades for anything close to the value that the Bengals are allegedly wanting at this time of the year? I was talking to someone with another team today and asking about this, and there's this idea that teams who have a player at this time of the year and planned their season expectations and their roster around this believe that that player is typically worth more. So the cost of a player often goes up in late August compared to October or March, because you're kind of seeing everything through the glasses of what could happen and how are we trying to convince our ownership and our leadership that this roster is going to be able to do it. Now, with Trey Hendrickson, to be clear, you don't really need to put very specific glasses on to see, 17 and a half sacks each of the last 2 seasons. But I do think there's this idea of, a first round pick and a young defensive player. Like when you look at Yannick Ngakoue, and I think it was 2020, he gets traded in August. That was for a second and a fifth, not a first and a player. And so I think we have to be a little bit realistic of, it's easy to say they're open to trades and it's easy to say that other teams are interested, but that in a vacuum doesn't mean much to me unless you're telling me there's actually legitimate interest in a similar price point.
Yeah, and I also think, and look, the Bengals claimed that a couple of months ago they were listening, right? There were those stories a couple of months ago. They wanted a one or multiple ones. And at that point, I stepped back. And I want to preface this by saying I like Trey Hendrickson. He's a really good player. He's a really good player. And you can't deny the stats. And you can't deny, for example, what he did week 18 when the Bengals needed him most and he put on a show against the Steelers on that Saturday night. But I don't know, and this might be unfair, that the league views Trey Hendrickson the way that he views himself. So Myles Garrett got 40 and TJ Watt got 41. No one's going to pay that money. They're not. And even if you go back pre-draft, I don't know that anyone would have given up a single one for Trey Hendrickson. Because I think if the Bengals were smart and they had that offer, they would have taken it. So Frank, help me out here. The stats are great. He's a team player. He's a good dude. Why doesn't the league view Trey Hendrickson in the same category as some of the other elite rushers?
Well, I think one stumbling block here, if you're talking about should you give up a first round pick, he's 30 years old. I don't think he's turned 31 yet. And it's getting up there for a defensive end. And if he's going to want a long-term deal, and I assume he does with a lot of guaranteed money up front, you're talking about, okay, is he going to be this good at 32, 33? I think that's a major stumbling block. Look, if Trey Hendrickson was doing this at age 25, I think a team would give up a one. Why not? Like, you got a lot of years ahead of you. I think that's a stumbling block there. And he's a very, very good player. But yes, I do not think he's TJ Watt. I don't think he's Myles Garrett. He's just not that good of an all-around player. But he is very, very good at the one thing all teams look for, and that's sacking the quarterback. So it's just hard to find a market for him because, yes, like you said, Trey Hendrickson's probably looking at this as, I had more sacks than Myles Garrett and TJ Watt last year. I led the league. I had 35 the last 2 years combined, whereas the rest of the NFL is like, well, yeah, but we're not going to pay you $40 million, especially at your age.
Joe Burrow
expected matter,
to
but
play.
No one in the league is sacks matter, but
Go
no
ahead,
one in
George,
the league is really saying that, hey, the sacks are reflective of his game as a whole. I think they think he's an excellent pass rusher. He finishes at the quarterback, but against the run, I don't think they believe that he is quite at that 17 and a half sack equivalent in terms of what his run defense looks like compared to his pass defense. I think in-house with the Bengals, they have this issue of they just paid Jamar Chase a ton of money, reset the market at the position, but they view Jamar as the best receiver in the league in the prime of his career at 25 years old. And then you have Trey Hendrickson saying, well, I think I'm at the best. I think my sack numbers tell you that story. I think I'm at the prime. I'm playing my best football personally. And the Bengals are like, okay, you might think that, but that doesn't mean we agree with you and we want to put the contracts out there. So going back to what you're saying about the league, Andrew, I would say that there's a difference between whether the league would want him or whether the league would want something and agree to pay the Bengals what they want to pay, because I know that everyone gets mad when teams say this, and Jerry Jones always says this about Micah Parsons, but Trey Hendrickson is under contract. Like, he is not a free agent. This would be a different story if he was a free agent, but as long as he has a year left on his Bengals contract, like, I say, why don't you just add a little more guaranteed to his money this year, ramp him up, but not give him a long-term deal. Then he can hit the market in the offseason. You can decide whether he's your guy or not based off the fact that you paid your 2 receivers. And oh, by the way, you didn't commit that long-term for T. Higgins if you really look at the fully guaranteed element of that deal. And then you can decide if you think at 31 years old, which Trey Hendrickson will turn in December, whether you still want him on your roster.
Yeah, I was pointing at you there, Jori, because it's a great point. They paid Jamar Chase. They did pay T. Higgins, but the details there, they got a little wiggle room after year number 1. It's a good eye on you there, or by you reading the contract. And yes, Mike Brown, I'm waving a piece of paper here. If there's any owner in the league that wants to say or is willing to say and does say, this is the contract and you signed it, okay, we are sticking to this contract, it is Mike Brown. And the question would have to be, is Trey Hendrickson going to step back and pull a Carson Palmer and go, it's okay, I'll go home? He's made roughly $63 million in his career. Is he willing to go, I'm good. Like, I don't want a sweetener. I want a long-term deal, and I'll sit at home until I get it. That remains to be seen. I mentioned there are trade stories on either side of tonight's game. The other one's in Washington, where it's not anything to do with Terry McLaurin, although he was activated over the weekend, they say, or at least last Friday. There's nothing moving there. He is still, much like Hendrickson, holding in. It actually is about Brian Robinson, the running back who is heading into the final year of his contract. What a great story. Came out of Alabama. He got shot Labor Day weekend as a rookie. He survived, and then he has turned into a really good football player, the player that you knew he was going to be. Amazing he survived and then had a rookie season. The last 2 years, he has combined 2,000 yards from scrimmage, something like 17, 18 touchdowns. He is a good football player. But the Commanders are thinking, do we want to pay him $3.5 million when we have Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez and a guy that I want everyone to keep an eye on this evening, assuming he does play, it's the preseason, a rookie out of Arizona named Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. He's turning heads, even though he played only 1 game last year at Arizona because there was a screw-up with his transfer from Alabama State because somebody else wore his uniform the year before, and they thought that he was ineligible because he played all these games. It's insane. But because a guy named Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, who likes to go by the name Bill, true story, is playing well, Jori, it seems as if Brian Robinson is now available.
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting. And every time you say someone's going by Bill, my grandfather's first name was Maurice, and he didn't like it, so he went by Bill. Granted, his middle name was William, but I know everyone watching this show really needed that information. That we have signs are very familiar with people going by Bill when that is not their given first name.
Okay.
I think that when I look at teams around the league, I kind of say, well, who are the teams that wait too long to make a decision on the player? And typically, if you wait too long, you lose a lot of your leverage, and then you're not figuring it out. And so I think right now when Brian Robinson Jr. could help the team, but he also might be more valuable to them as an asset, I think that's what we see the general managers like a Howie Roseman in Philadelphia do, and that's what the Commanders are taking a look at doing here.
They must really like Krosky Merritt because we're talking about $3.5 million for a starting running back who's pretty good at early downs. Like, this is not too much. The Washington Commanders aren't exactly like just killed on the salary cap right now. So to me, this is just all about, hey, we like this 7th round rookie who I think would have gone much higher in the draft had it not been for those eligibility issues. You look at the size, the speed, even the production in college. The production in 1 game in Arizona, he was really good. So to me, this is less a Brian Robinson thing and more, it has to be a Krosky Merritt thing because we're talking about Trey Hendrickson. He's making 16. He wants 25, 30, 40, whatever he wants. We're talking about $3.5 million for a pretty good early down guy after you're coming off a really, really good season in Washington. No, this is just about the rookie, I think. And I'm excited to see him tonight, however much he plays. And I'm excited to see him week 1 because it's clear to me anyway, Washington has something cooked up for him. They have high hopes for Bill Krosky Merritt and what he can do, even as a 7th round rookie.
Yeah, his story is kind of crazy. Again, he transferred. He bounced around a lot in college, but eventually got to Arizona, played 1 game, and then they said you're ineligible. And again, a screw up with who was wearing what jersey the year before, who knows? It's not worth unpacking at this point. But the kid hung around Tucson, and he was able to practice, but just not play. And so he stuck around. He got taken in the 7th round. And he wants to be known as Bill because as a little kid, he either didn't have a lot of hair or they shaved his head and he was basically bald as a little kid, or that's how he went to school. And there was that Bill Cosby cartoon, like the little Bill, right? And the little kid was bald. And so he thought he looked like that. And so he just wanted to be called Bill. And it stuck. And they love Bill now in Washington. And some might even say he's a deep fantasy sleeper. As for the running back market, it's tough out there for running backs. I was just in Carolina last week where Rico Dowdle, who ran for 1,000 yards last season in Dallas, 1,000, signed with the Panthers for like $2.3 million. 2.3. That's it. And so maybe Washington, to your point there, Jori, is thinking, hey, we don't want to cut him. We know he's still a good player. He's probably going to get buried on our depth chart. We like this other guy who's cheaper anyway. Somebody want to flip us a 5 or a 6? Anybody want to do a pick swap? And if we can do that, then let's move on. We're going to move on here as well. Coming up on Inside Coverage, the how, the why, everything you need to know in the National Football League. We'll tell you how and why the Cleveland Browns named Joe Flacco as their starting quarterback today, and what it means for a certain third-round rookie and fifth-round rookie. That's coming up next. Inside Coverage on Yahoo. Thank you for watching. My name is Andrew Siciliano. In the center square, it's Frank Schwab, Jori Epstein on the other side. The how and why from today's news in the National Football League. Well, the how is Joe Flacco. The why is because he's the best quarterback in camp. The Cleveland Browns today named Joe Flacco. He's a man, he's 40, as their starting quarterback. Not just for a dress rehearsal this coming Saturday, a 1 o'clock matinee at Huntington Bank Field against the Rams, in which Sean McVay will play nobody. He might even sign guys off the street to take Rams jerseys and to keep his guys healthy. But Joe Flacco is the Week 1 starter. So September 7th, circle it on your calendar. It's Joe Burrow and Joe Flacco. Why is he the starting quarterback? Guys, because he's the best quarterback in camp. He's also the healthiest quarterback in camp, despite being the oldest quarterback in camp. I know that's hard to wrap your head around it, not you too, but anyone out there, but that simply is the truth. And this big four-way competition, this big four-way or this big four-horse race that everyone was so eager to get daily results on never really materialized, because Gabriel, who played well on Saturday, has a hammy, because Shador, who threw before the game and might be able to play this week, has an oblique, and because Kenny Pickett, who, you know what, might have won the job if healthy, also pulled a hammy and still is not ready to go. So, Jori, it is Joe Flacco, who took the Browns to the playoffs down the stretch in 2023, who doesn't just win by default. He wins because right now he's the best guy.
Absolutely. And I think even before these injuries, this always seemed like the most likely outcome week one to me. I mean, Andrew, you and I saw each other at the Browns during mini camp before the summer break, before training camp. And to me, I left there thinking, this is not a four-way quarterback battle. This is two-way quarterback battles. There is the veteran battle for week one, and there is the rookie battle of, hey, who is most likely to be the one who gets a chance later in the season if they decide to go from win now mode to let's develop and plan for the future and determine if our guy's in house mode. And I think that when I asked so many people around Cleveland, everyone from general manager Andrew Berry to head coach Kevin Stefanski, offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, what they were aligned on is the idea that their week one starter would be decided based off who is best able to operate the offense and make smart decisions. And that is not a question of like, oh, it's funny because oftentimes that sounds cliche. And in this situation, it's like, no, decision making and operation rather than playmaking, we're going to decide the week one battle because you just cannot tell your team we're not going with the most ready quarterback right now. I think that's extremely difficult for team morale. So to me, even if this wasn't an injury element, this is where we were headed all along for week one. Someone was going to have to surprise or do something unexpected to unseat Joe Flacco from having the trust of Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, I think we always talk about two things can be true is Joe Flacco is their best quarterback, and also that is a sad statement for the Cleveland Browns because we saw Joe Flacco last year. The Colts tried to bench Anthony Richardson, say we need some time with Anthony. They watched 2 weeks of Flacco, and they're like, oh, we can't do this either. So anyway, that's your Browns starting quarterback in week one. Huzzah. And and also, yes, you're right. You can't put a guy out there when he's not ready. You can't put out the worst quarterback. But it also worked kind of both ways for Cleveland. We've talked all the time about their first 6 games. 1-5 wouldn't even be that bad of an outcome. 0-6 is on the table for them. It's an absolutely brutal start to the season. So you get through those 6 games, probably at some point in those 6 games or after it, Flacco gets benched. You go on to the next guy, and then you probably go on to the next. I'll say this. I've said it. 4 quarterbacks are going to start for the Cleveland Browns this year. I don't know when exactly. Kenny Pickett's going to take over, and Dylan Gabriel's going to take over, Shadur's going to take over. But I do believe all 4 quarterbacks at least start one game this year because I think you're going to want to get a look at both rookies. But I think Kenny Pickett's next in line. I don't think Joe Flacco's making the season. It's just a mess in Cleveland. Look, their starting quarterback for 2026 is going to be playing on Saturdays this year. Okay, none of these guys are going to end up being the answer, much less Joe Flacco. All
right, Frank, how much time do we have here? Because
much as you want.
There's a lot I want to push back against. I kid because I care,
sure.
As somebody once said. I kid because I don't care, as somebody else once said. So a couple of things. I agree with you, likely multiple quarterbacks. I think the biggest question is, at what point do you say we need to see the kids? And then which of the young quarterbacks is the first one up? If you believe depth charts, and I don't put a lot of stock in them, right now it is still Gabriel 3 and Sanders 4. That could change, right? They both played well. And by the way, it's not a binary decision. Browns fans, it is okay to say that both Shador Sanders and Dylan Gabriel played well. I don't have to pick right now. They both played well. And if you're one of those fans out there that is screaming, this one's good and that one's awful, whichever one, you're probably not a Browns fan. You're probably a fan of one of those 2 quarterbacks from college, and you're just rooting. But I digress. Eventually, and Jimmy Haslam has said this, you're going to have to see what you have. The question is when. I really do believe that if he had stayed healthy, there was a really good shot at Kenny Pickett winning this job. Because organizationally, you give up a 5th-round pick and you trade DTR. You saw DTR this Saturday, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Organizationally, there's a belief that, hey, Kenny Pickett won a lot of games in Pittsburgh. He has a winning record, 15-10. He had a lot of good fourth-quarter comebacks. There is something there. He's a first-round pick, and he was operating in a system in Pittsburgh that everyone knew. I mean, how many hours were spent on television saying the Steelers' offense is broken? It just wasn't working. That if here you give him an O-line, you give him a running game, you give him a play caller, there's something here with Kenny Pickett. Alas, it didn't happen. Right now it's Flacco, and you recapture, you hope, some of the magic from 2023. Jori, you make the great point. If you had traded Myles Garrett, okay, if Joel Bitonio had retired, right? If you didn't have respected veterans in that room that you can win with a good defense some games with, then this would be different. Then you say, let the best rookie quarterback win. But, Jori, that's not the situation they're in.
Absolutely. And I think they need to be honest about that. And I agree with you, Andrew, that it would have been better for the Browns if Kenny Pickett had won the competition. I just didn't think that he was necessarily even going to get the opportunities in some way to show Kevin Stefanski what he had already seen from Joe Flacco in real game action, winning the games a few years ago, taking them to the playoffs, all of that. I think what's interesting to me now is, do we think they're going to keep 4 quarterbacks on this roster? I asked Andrew Berry back in June if he was interested in doing that, and he said, quote, absolutely, that he would consider it. And you hear that it's always funny when you go on these interviews and you hear a few different people say the same thing in answer to a question, and you're like, okay, this is something that's been talked about around the building. So in this case, when I asked both Andrew Berry and I believe it was Tommy Rees whether they thought they would keep 4 quarterbacks and it was realistic for the rest of their roster to carry 4 quarterbacks, both of them pointed to the New England Patriots in 2000. Hey, well, Tom Brady's rookie season, they had 4 quarterbacks on the roster. And oh, by the way, the next year there's only 2 on the roster and they're winning the Super Bowl. I don't think that actually means that they should or will keep 4 quarterbacks. But I think the injuries in some ways complicate it because you have less information to make an informed decision on the basis of. On the other hand, maybe you just put someone on IR if you don't think is going to play anytime soon anyway, and you want a little bit more time to buy. I mean, I'm not sure the player would love that, but I don't think it's the worst option. And oh, by the way, we still have Deshaun Watson in the building.
And Tyler Huntley, who for the second consecutive week went out there as the sole captain. I don't know if anyone noticed this. You wouldn't see it on the simulcast on NFL Network because they're covering those first 6 minutes, the anthem and the intros and all that, because they're taking another feed. But Kevin Stefanski loves Snoop Huntley so much that he sent him out there each of the last 2 weeks as the solo captain to flip the coin. Maybe IR is a possibility. If anyone wants to call the Browns, I'm sure they'll listen. But Jori, for the record, was, I believe, the first person to get Andrew Berry on the record saying, yeah, we might keep 4. No, I gotcha. That is the case. And then he later said it in his training camp press conference. It's not the only news with the Browns today. Isaiah Bond, we talked about this last Thursday, has now officially signed. The former Alabama and Texas wide receiver had a no bill against him, meaning a sexual assault allegation. The charges, or rather the DA in Texas, the state's attorney, decided to not follow through with charges this past week. And the Browns signed Isaiah Bond today for a 3-year guaranteed contract for north of $3 million, which means he's making the team, which means maybe Deontay Johnson, his roster spot, is in danger. So the Browns, you'd have to feel that they get a second or third round value for a guy that they were able to sign off the street. In essence, it's a free draft pick. It should be noted, however, Frank, that the number 36 overall pick, Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ohio State, who, much like Bond, will not face charges, an allegation of domestic abuse in Florida that was between minicamp and the start of training camp, has still not yet signed. Friend at ESPN, Adam Schefter, reports that he may not sign until the NFL wraps up its investigation. And if you're Quinshon Judkins, Frank, you're probably going, you gave Isaiah Bond $3 million guaranteed. I would like my full guarantee. Yet he's already run afoul of the law. Even with charges being dropped, he could be suspended. So that looks like an impasse.
You just get the feeling like every time a player gets in trouble, the agent just makes sure the Browns are on speed dial. They'll take them. Of all the franchises,
you're making them ching bag today, Frank.
Oh my goodness, Andrew, come on, be honest here. It just seems like, why would this franchise of all franchises be the one always in that business? But I get it. A Bond, you feel like you're getting a discount. With Judkins, I think this is just getting really, really complicated and messy. They'll wait for the NFL to rule, then try to sign him to a contract. I hate to say this before we've even played a game with either of these guys, but the Browns took Judkins over Trey Hendrickson, who looks absolutely unbelievable so far with the Patriots. I don't know. It's not good. Nothing. I hate talking about the Browns in front of you, Andrew, because nothing is good to talk about them. We can talk about Myles Garrett. We can do a segment on him because he's awesome. Denzel Ward, maybe. but there's not much else good to talk about. This is just a franchise that it just can't get out of its own way so many times.
The defense is going to be great.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm sorry. Jori, go ahead.
On ESPN today, I'm going through Browns news, and each page per team, they've got the news. And back-to-back headlines for the Browns on ESPN are one, Browns Judkins won't face charge for July arrest, and right next to it, Bond won't be charged, says he's joining Browns. And I think to me that sums it up is I'm not trying to litigate on this show who's innocent, what happened, and what the facts were. We need a lot more information to feel like we could get there. And I have covered players during my 10 seasons in the NFL who have had charges dropped, been pretty much model citizens the rest of their time there, and you never know all of these cases. I'm not doubting victims, but I'm saying, like, I don't think that we should jump to conclusions on everything just because I think both sides deserve a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. That said, it's one thing to bring in a player. The Browns do have this pattern of just person after person. And I know speeding tickets and domestic violence and sexual assault are not in the same categories, but doesn't it feel like we're getting to a point where the Browns have way more off-field headlines than on-field headlines? And I think this goes directly to what we're going to talk about with Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And when you have this question of, was Dillon Gabriel taking a jab at Shedeur Sanders during the game, or was he just saying something about the media? And I think all of this is, well, maybe this wasn't something Dillon Gabriel did wrong, but maybe the Browns set him in a situation where you can't truly succeed. You can't fully win. And I think the more of these guys you continue to have on your team, it's one thing to believe in rehabilitating guys. And I don't think we should just cancel everyone who ever makes a mistake. I think that's an unsustainable way to run a society. I'm getting very philosophical here.
No,
I do
right.
think that you have to be realistic about what the Browns are doing and how different it looks from all 31 other teams in this league.
Yeah. So, again, a lot to unpack. And, Jori, you make some good points. Let's start with Bond. In the release today, Andrew Berry says they gave Bond a polygraph, independently administered, and that he passed it. They've talked to both sides. I can only go with what they say. And that Tommy Rees, who was his offensive coordinator, Bond's OC 2 years ago at Alabama, vouched for him, number one. As for Judkins, there had been no signs ever of this kind of behavior off the field. None. Absolutely none. And the Browns didn't want to go there after everything happened with their second-round pick last year, Mike Hall. So this was not the kind of trouble they wanted in the draft. It has happened, and now they're trying to navigate it. Right now, Quinshon Judkins is not yet signed. As for the quarterback thing, I'm glad we're talking about what Dillon Gabriel said to Aditi Kinkhabwala on the local TV broadcast, News 5, this past Saturday. Just a little bit of context here. Dillon Gabriel said, some people are competitors, some people are entertainers. I'm a competitor. It was not a shot at Shedeur. It simply was not. And here is the context, people. Dillon Gabriel has said things like that in the past. As a matter of fact, during a production meeting, he said it on Friday, the day before. The question was asked, like, how do you deal with all the noise? And he said, well, there's entertainers and there's competitors. Entertainers meaning everyone on TV screaming and yelling about this thing, right? The hype, the noise, because the question was the noise. And he said, I'm a competitor. I only have to just focus on what I can do. Dan Lanning has said similar things. Dillon Gabriel has said similar things. And if you watch the full interview with Aditi, she alludes to previous conversations and the wisdom that he had bestowed. Bestow's a little too strong. That he had, the wise things that he had said the day before. And you look at it, Gabriel says, well, like we're doing this here right now, kind of proving my point or his point that entertainment, this is the entertainment business. We're doing an in-game interview. And then he says what he said. It wasn't about Shedeur. Also, I realize now that, as I said earlier in this quarterback conversation between these two, people are going to hear what they want to hear. So it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter how everyone else explains it. It doesn't matter that Dillon denied it. But it should, and that's the proper context. I know what the guy was saying. It wasn't a shot.
Andrew, I completely agree with you that was not Dillon Gabriel's intention, and he was not trying to take a shot at Shedeur Sanders. And let's be a little bit realistic about whether a teammate would want to do that. They're in the same room. Like, even if he thought that way, which I don't think he does, it doesn't make sense. But do you hold the Browns responsible at all for setting up some of these situations?
I mean, he's just giving an interview on the sideline. That situation?
No, just like, okay, if you draft 2 guys, there's going to be this conversation. If you have so many off-field issues, that's going to be a challenge. So not Dylan Gabriel being asked a question, but is it shocking that people are reading more into almost everything going on with the Browns right now, given all of the storylines they seem to, in some ways, be putting on themselves?
I understand where you're coming from. I do think, and it's hard to take all of the 3 things you just listed and look at them on a case-by-case basis. But I do think you have to here. Quinshon Judkins, again, no one on draft day said, Quinshon Judkins, how are you doing this? Nobody, like, at all. I've dealt with the guy before they broke for the summer. I've done a sit-down with him. I've interviewed him a couple times. I think he's great. Everybody loved him in the building. And then this happened, and there are no charges. I'm not here to litigate it like you said either, but there were no pre-draft red flags on this. There simply weren't. Isaiah Bond's different. Clearly, there are other teams that wanted to sign him. The Browns signed him. That one is what it is. We'll see how it turns out. The Dylan Gabriel thing, they drafted 2 quarterbacks. They're not the first team to draft 2 quarterbacks. Gabriel said what he said. I know the context. I understand why people want to read into it. It's a string. Those, I don't say unfortunate events, but they're kind of all unrelated. But yeah, I mean, obviously those headlines are what they are. Those headlines don't get forgotten until you play a game. And they're going to play a game coming up on September 7th, and we'll see what happens. The Rams also play a game on September 7th. They play a game against the Houston Texans. Will Matthew Stafford be their quarterback? Coming up next on Inside Coverage, the how or the why, what Sean McVay had to say today about Matthew Stafford and his aging back. That's next. All right, we are 3 weeks away from the Monday night opener. That means we are inside of 3 weeks from your first full Sunday. At 4:25 Eastern Time, the LA Rams will, at SoFi Stadium, welcome C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans to town. The question is, who's playing quarterback for the Rams? Matthew Stafford did something today that he has not done all summer. He practiced, actually got through a practice. This was his very first one after working out on Saturday. He was able to go. Sean McVay, however, is not committing to week 1. He had said a few weeks ago, Jori, that, we're good to go for week 1. Now he's a little more cautious. They want to see how Matthew feels tomorrow morning when he wakes up, We know for certain, because McVay never plays his starters, that there's no way Stafford will play in the preseason finale coming up on Saturday. But the Rams are really crossing their fingers here, and they are not making a big commitment yet, as of now, to getting Stafford back for week 1.
I still think it's more likely than not that we will see Matthew Stafford week 1, but I think that after Sean McVay had a situation where he anticipated a return to practice that ended up getting delayed, Sean McVay is realizing maybe it's a little bit better if we slow the expectations and let him exceed a lower expectation rather than potentially fall short. Now, as we mentioned, there is an opportunity if the Rams really feel like 3 weeks is going to make the difference between what Matthew Stafford could do, that they have Jimmy Garoppolo, one of the better, if not the best backup in the league. And so I don't feel like, they have no chance of winning if they don't have Matthew Stafford in. But I expect him to be on track, especially now that he's returning to practice. When I talk to people during my visit of training camp, and this was before he returned to practice, there was a lot of confidence in Matthew's ability to go week 1, just not confidence in the wisdom of putting him out there for all of training camp as he was still navigating some of the rehabilitation. And so I think that we'll see him. My question is still just how much is he going to be in not a load management, but just sort of a pain management scenario.
And that's my issue too. It's not whether Matthew Stafford's going to be there week 1, because I think he will. He's a really, really tough guy. I mean, it's funny to think back early in his career, we were calling him injury prone. Like, no, this dude plays through everything. And if Sean McVay was like, we're just going to go with Jimmy week 1, I would love to see that argument, because I think Matthew Stafford would really put up a fight on that. I think he'll be there week 1. My only issue is he's 37 and he has a back issue that's now lingered for a few weeks. Is he going to ever get to 100% during the season? I know guys aren't 100%, but I think we know what I'm talking about contextually, that this just seems like it could affect his performance a little bit. Maybe he misses games during the season if it gets re-aggravated. I just worry about Matthew Stafford, not for week 1, but just how effective he's going to be for a really, really long season.
Yeah, and anyone who's had a bad back knows. Like, I'll be honest with you, this is a very uncomfortable chair, guys, that I'm sitting in. I'm trying to stay upright with good posture. My back is killing me right now. And I'm older than Matthew Stafford. I also don't get hit for a living. But you get my point. If you have a bad back, and I have had a disc issue, like, it never goes away. And you guys have stood on NFL sidelines. Jori, every tackle at home, like the fan at home is just watching the game and they're on their phone. They're not even really paying attention. And like, guy gets tackled after a 4-yard gain. That's a car crash for you and me, right? You get, rear fender bender at a red light. Your back is going to hurt for a month and you're going to be telling everyone how you barely survived this massive pileup. That's what Matthew Stafford has to go through every time he gets hit. If he plays week 1, I'm with you. I think he does. You always have to have Jimmy Garoppolo on standby, or for that matter, Stetson Bennett, who looked great Saturday night.
I definitely agree with you that I expect Matthew Stafford to start week 1, but I'm also curious, as Frank mentioned, come week 10, 11, how is he going to be feeling? And all the more so if they're playoff contenders, will they end up saying, like, well, we feel like we've got a little bit of a cushion, especially when you look at their division, that they can rest him for a couple weeks to try and get him to peak during the playoffs. I don't think that's completely out of the question. And I think that this is just something where you have to say, I don't really expect it to influence the way he plays, because as we said, he plays through everything. And once you get sort of this unrealistic expectation of what you can do, and that you are so set on that you do it, I think that's kind of where Matthew Stafford's at, that he's going to make it happen. But I do think it's going to take a toll. And also when you think about where he is relative to the end of his career, this could be legitimately influencing the end of his career.
And Frank, there's something else here too, and this came up today because Sean got asked about it today. It's maybe one of the least reported big storylines in my eyes in the entire league. That is Alaric Jackson, the Rams left tackle, dealing with blood clots. He's not ready to go yet. And there is absolutely zero commitment that he's going to be ready for week 1. Now, they brought in Jonah Williams. They could do some other things, but we're talking about a legitimate playoff contender, a legitimate conference championship game contender that right now doesn't have their left tackle. So let's go fingers crossed Stafford is out there. Okay, well, you got to protect him.
And it's not, the combination of that, like, the combination of that, the left tackle you just paid a ton of money to might not be there week one, and your 37-year-old quarterback has a bad back. Like, this is all the math that they got to go through. And the management of this is so important because, like you said, Andrew, this is a Rams team that should come into the season feeling like we could win a Super Bowl. We were the only team to even give the Eagles a game in the playoffs. We were hot as heck by the end of the season with a really young defense.
Yep.
We could win a Super Bowl, but we all know they ain't winning the Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford's not Matthew Stafford.
You know how many sacks the Rams had in their 2 playoff games? Sacks of the opponent. So Sam Darnold, when they beat the Vikings in Arizona on that Monday night, and then the
9,
game in the
right?
snow. Yeah, they had 9 that night. They had 16. That young defensive front. Kobe Turner,
Jared Verse,
and
he
Byron
could win Defense
Young,
Player of the Year. He's really good.
and Jared Verse, exactly, and Braden Fisk. Those big four, those big four Les Snead draft picks in the last 2 years, collectively that front seven put up 16 sacks in the final 2 games. So yeah, they're gonna need a lot of sacks if Matthew Stafford is not there or is not ready. Coming up next, there are other quarterbacks to talk about. There are other things that happened this weekend. Like Caleb Williams. Did you see what he did last night? Every Bears fan is ready for a Michigan Avenue parade. And we'll tell you what Cam Ward did today in practice and why Jeffrey Simmons didn't like it. That's next on Inside Coverage. So there is this old adage, and hi, by the way, we're back on Inside Coverage. I'm Andrew, that's Frank, that's Jori. There is this old adage, guys, that the preseason, the games don't count, but they matter, right? And you take the preseason and you could spin it however you want, right? If you play poorly, it doesn't matter, guys. These games don't count. If you play well, you're going against nobody. You're going against guys who are going to get cut on the 26th. So you could spin it however you want. I'm watching Caleb Williams on that 92-yard touchdown drive. Primetime, Joe Davis and Greg Olson on the call, right? You got Menifee and Julian Edelman on the sideline. Like, it's got a big feel to it. And you watch Caleb Williams march down the field for a 92-yard touchdown drive, throwing lasers all over the field. And I know I tweeted, Caleb's dealing, Frank. I mean, like, I used to live and work there. I used to cover the Bears. I used to do their sidelines. Like, they haven't had the quarterback in forever. And so many Bears fans look at Washington and go, oh, we still don't have the quarterback. We drafted the wrong guy. But, oh, no, Ben's going to save him. Last night was like that. That was like their Super Bowl for a drive. And they're going to be talking about that drive the entire season, right? If it goes poorly, it's, well, we saw it for a minute there. Like, that was that moment. Can they keep that going?
And the funny thing is, what do we hear all of camp? Like, oh, the offense is struggling. Ben Johnson's yelling at everybody every day. There's all these mistakes. And then they get out there in a game situation, and that looked like clockwork. The throw he made to Kmet over the middle was breathtaking. But we know Caleb Williams could do that. He was the first pick of the draft for a reason. He's got this cannon of an arm. He's got all these physical skills. What impressed me so much last night was everything was out on time. Like click, click, click. Like it was, you could tell the Ben Johnson influence on Caleb Williams' game. Last year, he held the ball way too long, took 66 sacks, led the NFL in that category. And you just wondered, is that just part of his game? Because that was a criticism of him his last season at USC. He's just trying to do too much. He can't play at the timing, anticipation you need, processing quick enough. He processed everything great last night. If that's what we're going to see from the Bears offense this year, with Caleb Williams playing with that kind of timing, anticipation, it was just so impressive. The Bears are going to be pretty good this year. Caleb's going to be pretty good this year. It's just one drive. I get it, but we saw it. And like you said, Andrew, like now that we've seen it like in action, you're like, whoa, okay. Now I can get behind maybe the Bears being a really good team this year. Caleb Williams having this monster season.
Frank, do you have another team going to the Super Bowl now because you saw something from them in the preseason?
No, Jori. You always talk about me being too positive. I know that. I know. That's how it goes.
Positive on everyone but the Browns, Frank. You love 31 teams. In the
Everyone, 31 teams. I have one step.
30. You love 31 teams are going to win the Super Bowl.
At some point, every
I think
team
the Bears
fan
are
base
really
hates
interesting
me, so
because I'm working on a story on Jaden Daniels right now, and a lot of the premise is that the Commanders did right by Caleb in ways, not by Caleb. The Commanders did right by Jaden in a way that so many teams often do wrong by quarterbacks. I think teams will tell you this, routinely fail quarterbacks with the infrastructure, with what they're asking them to do from a system standpoint, with the pieces they're putting around them, even as simple as how they're scheduling practices and how they're ramping up their offense. What I wondered with Ben Johnson as we're hearing all of these reports coming out of training camp is, that's great that Ben wants to make training camp hard so that in-season feels easy. But if you don't develop a player's confidence and his teammates' confidence in him by starting with somewhat simple or at least methodical ways to get wins, are you actually going to accomplish that? I think we saw some of the latter in the preseason game. I think we saw some of that. But I do think there's a case for you need to establish this. And I mean, famously, Cam Taylor-Britt of the Bengals last year was talking about Jaden Daniels going into week 3 and saying, like, oh, what he does is simple. It's a nice college offense. And I actually don't think Cam Taylor-Britt even meant that as disparagingly as people took it. But I think to me, that was actually a compliment rather than a knock on something. And so when I look at Ben Johnson and Caleb, I say, how much are you doing that? And just because you did that in the preseason, are you going to do that week 1? Because maybe I'm wrong, but if Ben Johnson tries to take the same approach that he took with Jared Goff for Caleb Williams, I don't think it works because I think Caleb is too early in his career for that to work immediately. I'm not saying he doesn't have the talent. I just do think you do have to have a gradual onboarding.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point there as well. And remember, Jared Goff, you're coming. You go back to when Sean McVay got his hands on Jared Goff. Jared, as a rookie, didn't start the first half of the year. It was Jeff Fisher with a guy named Rob Baronis, the tight end coach, calling plays. Had never really been an OC in the NFL. And it just didn't work well when Jared took over. Everyone gets fired. You bring in Sean McVay in that very first game of the Coliseum against the Colts. All of a sudden, Jared Goff looks like the kid we saw as a freshman at Cal, and he's throwing lasers all over the field. Bears fans hope that this is what they get now. The tie there being Shane Waldron, who is also on Sean McVay's staff, but you know that's neither here nor there. What hit me last night, and they're very different quarterbacks. It was kind of the moment, Frank, for me. Remember last year when the Panthers were in Germany? I think they were facing the Giants, and I remember turning that game on and seeing Bryce Young march up and down the field. That was kind of the day that the light went on for him, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that guy. That's the guy that used to play at Alabama.
Yeah.
I know him.
Heisman, yeah.
Right. It's like Will Ferrell, like Santa. I know him, and that was how I viewed last night's game. I know that Caleb Williams. That's the guy that won the Heisman at USC. Frank, I know him, and if you can keep getting even 80% of that, the Bears will be fine.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I get what you mean, Jori, that, I mean, it's still very early in his development, but boy, they've done a lot for him. They went out and spent and landed the white whale of the coaching search to Ben Johnson to get with him. They improved the interior of the offensive line. They went out and used their first 2 picks on Colson Loveland and Luther Burden. If Caleb like spectacularly fails this year, then you just got to say it may not happen. Like that, it's tough to say that about a guy after 2 years, but they've put him in a position to succeed really, really well here. And you just want to see some progress. Yeah, they might not be the Super Bowl, as I tried to do 5 minutes ago, but you want to see progress out of Caleb Williams to say, okay, we saw the steps there. He's going to be even better in year 3.
The schedule, not nice.
Well, Frank,
they open up. Go ahead, Jori. Monday night against the Vikings, and then at Detroit, then Dallas, then at Vegas. Other than that, the schedule's easy. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Frank, I would say I somewhat disagree with your black and white take of Super Bowl or Caleb's not the guy, but I'm actually glad you gave us these 2 contrasts, because when you look at Tyson Bagent talking about what Ben Johnson was like after the game, Tyson Bagent being the other quarterback who played in addition to Caleb Williams, of course, he actually said that black and white was exactly what the coaching staff gave them, and he meant it as a compliment. And he said that the previous staff, there was some gray area, and there's some times where they felt like it was in limbo of what play should we have called. We called that, but maybe we should have called this. And Tyson felt like with this coaching staff, it was, we know exactly what play we're going to call. We know what we want to do. And I recognize it's the preseason game, but he felt like that was pretty significant. And so I think if you can keep that clarity, that's great. You just got to make sure that your players are able to execute what you're asking them to do, because if you're clear, but they're not able to do it yet, then that's another thing. I'll also note that, multiple players mentioned that despite Ben Johnson being extremely intense in practice and cussing them out regularly between plays, he was actually pretty even-keeled, and they were surprised how calm he is in games. So I think that actually could be interesting in terms of how that different emotional element is impacting the quarterback each of those times.
I yell at you during the week. I'm nice to you on game day. We have 90 seconds remaining here for our final story. I thought Cam Ward looked good on Friday night. The stats don't tell that story. He had a pass drop by Van Jefferson. That was a bleeping laser. That was a thing of beauty. But today in practice back in Tennessee, Cam Ward threw a touchdown to Calvin Ridley and then ran into the end zone and shoved Jeffrey Simmons in the back. Jeffrey Simmons, big defensive tackle, then turns around and hits Cam Ward with 2 hands in the face. Frank, in our final minute, good or bad rookie quarterback showing that much intensity, shoving your best defensive player?
I like the intensity. I don't like messing with Jeffrey Simmons. I'll tell you that. Cam, come on, buddy. Don't pick on someone. Pick on a cornerback or something. Go find somebody else. Simmons, no. Don't get in that business. That's bad.
Jori.
Teams want offensive linemen to stand up when someone goes after the quarterback. They do not want quarterbacks going after the defensive linemen. They are just too valuable.
It's out of a bad movie, though, right? You fight the biggest guy in the room to prove you're the tough guy. Cam Ward has already proven to this building that he is the guy. He is the alpha dog. I don't know, though. I'm with you both that you need to go fight Jeffrey Simmons. I wouldn't want to do that. But maybe he takes Jeffrey Simmons aside later and goes, hey, it was all a setup. Thanks for playing along. You never know.
I like Cam, man.
Cam's going to be beforehand, too, because if not, you have to worry about how Jeffrey Simmons is going to respond.
I know.
Think about how much testosterone is going in all of the energy, and all of a sudden someone comes and gets you. I mean, a lot could go wrong.
But thankfully it didn't. And thankfully we have another show. For Frank and Jori, I'm Andrew. So long, everybody.
Wow.